You're listening to the Future Tech Podcast with Richard Jacobs. Future technologies such as artificial intelligence, stem cells, 3D printing, gene editing, Bitcoin, blockchain, the microbiome, quantum computing, virtual reality, and exploring space are much closer than you might think. In fact, many early versions of these technologies are in play right now, and the companies that are using these technologies are the focus of this podcast. My goal for you, the listener, is to learn from these podcasts. You may very well learn something that may change the course of your life for the better, steer you towards a new career, or give you insight into addressing a thorny medical problem. Remember, this podcast and its content is informational in nature only. No medical, tax, legal, financial, or psychological advice is being given. If you've enjoyed the podcast, please listen, subscribe, like, and tell your friends about it. Thank you. Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Future Tech Health Podcast, and I have Joshua Neely, Chief Growth Officer at CannabisMD. So, Josh, thanks for coming.
Thank you very much. How are you doing?
Good. Cannabis MD sounds like WebMD, but with cannabis instead. But what's the premise of the company?
So it's funny because when you put MD after the word cannabis, there's a lot of premise that can come to mind. WebMD is a natural one that, you know, even we had discussed and did angle towards that way at the start. But as we sort of went on and on, we took on board Michael Klein, a very, very good CEO. He used to run original programming at MTV, etc. And he brought on Jennifer Romolini as well and a few other people, which saw us naturally. I suppose it made us take a step back, and rather than look at cannabis media as just cannabis media, it was, let's look at cannabis, but from an actual media perspective. So you're talking media elites, not just, you know, and I'm not even going to name out names because I do love a lot of them, but, you know, not just people who have a passion, but genuinely people who understand how to package a message up, how to put it across clearly and in a way that's understandable for the average person, not even the person who uses cannabis, because obviously there's an issue at the moment. You think about, where do I want to go and learn about CBD? Every single place you go to learn about CBD right now will be on a website that is completely what you could call endemic, you know, would promote smoke, puffing, you know, stonerism, or whatever you would want to call it.
Well, I was going to ask you that. I would think with CBD, there's now a split where, you know, some people are still in the marijuana, you know, THC world, and then CBD world, it's completely separate. It seems like, at least in the U.S., you know, everything about it seems very different. You know, it's for healing or inflammation.
And that is true. Because that's the natural way. It doesn't make me high, so it's okay. So let's almost use CBD to separate this message across. But I mean, realistically, this is the idea of Cannabis MD. We're creating a very, like, you know, with all previous industry experience going back for years from Condé Nast, etc., you know, Yahoo, Shine, so on, and bringing that into the cannabis world to create something that is genuine. It's up to the spec of the global market. And it's what a normal person would expect to see if they were going into a place and they picked up something that was even next to Vogue. You know, we want this to be, our idea of this is to be the mainstream, not to be the guys who are like, oh, this is the website for stoners. This is the website for, you know, like, I'm going to say it, like people like myself, you know, who work very hard but also like to get stoned. You know, it's not that. This is the website of, like, this is your life. You're a person. You're like reading stuff. And one of your biggest interests just happens to be cannabis. So we're going to make sure you know about that while you're getting everything like an enjoyable read. Like, that's essentially it. We're not going to sit there with, you know, people figuring out as many topics on CBD as possible that we can cover with, you know, 3,000 word in-depth articles that we can, you know, put a doctor tagline on, you know, like, which is something we want to provide as well, of course, naturally. But, it really is like I'll use a term here. We're fishing with strawberries rather than worms. We're creating what the market needs just as much as what the market wants.
You mean, does it not need the silos of CBD versus recreational marijuana use? It needs like a home for every possible aspect of cannabis? Is that what the premise is?
I wouldn't say that. I would say what we're trying to create is, in politics, there's something called the Overton window. And the Overton window is like, it's all over the place in America at the moment because you've got such a left and right wing split at the moment. But it's like if you imagine you've got a window and as you open it, you cover certain areas. And those areas could be how socially acceptable, certain things are. And with cannabis at the moment, it obviously has some taboo. And let's be serious with cannabis. Like, so most people really don't mind. It's just because there still is a good percentage of people, maybe 20% or so, who really, really, really are against it. So this is the place that really is not about going after the market who already uses this. This is about educating the general populace, and going along the lines of that Overton window to make sure that we're creating a place that talks to the general consumer, but also evolves with the general consumer. So, at the moment, yes, you'll find we're much more naturally approaching CBD because the general market is all over CBD. Cannabis is still a lot more taboo. So that's where we are. And we're not always positive. Sometimes we can be negative if there's something better to use. And we're just very lucky that we're able to do this because we've got and this is really the tech side of it, we made a proprietary system that essentially takes from some other technologies that, obviously Amazon have technologies in AWS where you can read what's in pictures, you've got topic modeling tools, for reading text. So we grouped all of these things together, creating traditional social listening style of a system, but then, introduced our own proprietary sentiment analysis. And then we also went into emotions because, with this Overton window in cannabis at the moment, one of the biggest things that's driving the marketplace is emotions. It's an emotional marketplace, and I love it for it. And at the moment, if you look at the marketplace, it's completely ridden with joy. And I love that. Great. Yeah. It's the only market in the world where we decide that it's the most happiest market. Everywhere else is sad and sinister. But when we went and put this on, we started to crawl every website we could on the internet. We started to plug in with other data sources and make partnerships. What we actually find, and this is very interesting, was this market currently isn't driven by brands. It isn't driven by celebrities. And yes, there's some out there you can, Dosist, great brand, they're leading the way. But, the people who are using it, they're still selling based upon the effects, which will play to the emotion, calm, sleep.
Well, I mean, you have to pick a position. What's the position of CannabisMD? Is that
the position of
with or without THC, it still can help you. It has a lot of, medicinal uses, or what's the education about? Are you just educating people that
the education
cannabis is fun and you can get high, or that you can help yourself with chronic pain? For instance?
CannabisMD's position is we have several ailments, groups of people living with issues. And right now, CBD cannabis is being released as the miracle drug. Now, don't get me wrong, I love cannabis. I love technology, but it's not penicillin. So we're taking these 32 ailments and we sort of broke them down and we started writing into them. And it is a case of, look, when it comes to something like acne, if we see the research and we read into it and we get advised, tea tree oil is actually better than CBD oil, so you should try it first. We will tell you that because it's cheaper. But then in a situation where, I've got anxiety, but I refuse to go to the doctor, blah, 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 well, then it's definitely worth a go giving CBD because, for a lot of people personally, CBD can really help with anxiety. It helps me. I take CBD. But then with that, so our stance is it's not advocacy. It's not advocacy. It's just genuinely as much information we can get on the topic in a completely unbiased viewpoint as possible within the lens of what's currently on the mass an acceptable approach. So, and we do that with the proprietary AI that can see, brand celebrities, it's great, it gets some spike, but, joy, which I was talking about earlier, just to round it back, joy is about 30%. It's about a third of this marketplace. which means there's about 2/3 of this marketplace that isn't really being broached right now. And those two other sections are mainly sadness and fear. And it's fear around sickness, sadness around pain. It's genuine issues. And if you sit back, and I'm sure you have, you go to these cannabis conferences, you kind of go there and you look about, and you get the mix of your businessmen, your traditional. And I don't see stoners as a derogatory word, but you see your traditional like weed lovers, and you see people that you don't expect to see. You see grannies, and you see mums, and you see all of these people, and you're like, what's going on? And nobody sits there and thinks, are these people here because they're going home and they're watching Cheek and Chong? Like, no, they're not. They're here because they've got no other option. They've tried, and this is where they're falling back to. Now, where's the place for those people? The chief medical officer mums, the healthy ager who likes his cannabis but doesn't need to identify by it. Where's the place for the affluent millennial who, wants to come across as professional but wants to get that information at the same time? These are the people we're going for. We feel like everybody else has a space, but we're going for everybody who's not the people who want to go on the sites that have your, 420 memes and your flowers and cannabis flowers showing everywhere. We want to create a nice, safe, comfortable space where people can come in, and as they learn about the product, we can introduce more and more. And don't get me wrong, I mean, with this proprietary AI that we use, which we call the Knowledge Navigator, because we sell this on. We can sell this to any other cannabis company, and we're happy to do so. We can go and create, even with the likes of Facebook, we can create lookalike audiences based upon micro niche groups and use data essentially to figure out who's using cannabis for certain ailments, and you can target these people. So like we've built a group for anxiety in the space of 6 months for next to nothing, with over 70,000 people. And they're naturally creating groups within it, talking about cannabis and CBD. So you think about this. You're taking the person from their ailment. You're watching them come through the CannabisMD, learn. You can start to educate them, drip feed them, and push them more and more towards where they should be. And that's not always cannabis. It's not always CBD. But, at the end of the day, for some people, it is. And it's about understanding for what ailments and for what people, what their needs really are, and how we can address that as a company, and how we can make sure that that it comes across apparent on our website.
So being an insider, probably seeing the comments of thousands of people, is CBD all it's cracked up to be? What is it good for? What is it not good for, in your observation? So
I'm going to give you maybe a bit more of a unique lens on this. I don't know how many people you have from my side of the Atlantic on your show. So I am based in the UK, Northern Ireland.
Right.
And in the UK, funnily enough, the palaver that has surrounded CBD in America is, compared to cannabis, here it's night and day. Cannabis here is, whoa, you'd never go near it. CBD, I'm telling you now, in my town of 32,000 people, there is 8 CBD shops, and nobody thinks twice about it. It's just already there. It is already in people's lives. A good large group of people are using it already. I'm going to say it doesn't work for everyone. It really doesn't. But it does work for a lot of people, clearly, because I can see how it's developed here. And I'm confident, looking at the States, that as things develop, you've obviously got the actual flower variable in a lot of locations and the medical variable. But, looking at here, I think the same thing could happen, where people start to treat CBD almost like an amino acid, an essential nutrient, more so almost than even medicine sometimes. That's what I think we could see happen.
Well, again, what are you seeing is, some people are hyping CBD as like the cure-all. Some people, I'm sure, are very in doubt of it. But again, you have a unique perspective, I would think. What do you see? Is CBD, what's it good for? What's it not good for that you've observed? And again, it's not medical opinion. It's just your pure opinion. But what have you
my pure feelings, going away from everything. They're going into Joshua Neely here from Uri, Northern Ireland. My personal feelings, and don't get me wrong, Europe, we have this thing. I don't know if you know this. I think you even call it smoking Europe. Like, everyone mixes tobacco in with marijuana here. Bongs aren't popular, and neither are pipes. And I'm not a big smoker, but likewise, I'd mix the tobacco in with it. And when I used to smoke flower, what would happen is I'd become addicted to cigarettes, but I would refuse to smoke them. And that would become hell. So I lived like that for a very long time in my life, balancing that like an act. 3 months on, 3 months off, 3 months on, 3 months off. Absolute hell. It held me back. Genuinely did. It held me back. It stopped me being as efficient as I could be. And then this thing called CBD came out. Now, to explain, and I'll be a very transparent person. My anxiety issues aren't too bad. I have had a history of serotonin deficiency that could be defined almost as a bit of depression, and I have I've got the addiction. So there's the three lenses, and I can, I suppose, talk for sleep. So they're the lenses that I feel like I can appropriately comment on. And within my lens, I will say for sleep and anxiety, a large, like for me personally, and I'm 130 kilos and 6'4", but for me, I like taking a good 50 milligrams tincture for like anxiety and sleep, etc. And you see, for quitting smoking, or that discussion problem I was telling you about there, a CBD vaporizer was an absolute lifesaver for me. I couldn't believe it. It was just that edge when you're like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, where people would normally go to like a Nicorette or something. I don't know if you have that there. I could just puff the CBD vaporizer for 3 minutes. And, that was it. Since CBD hit the UK, I've never touched tobacco. And, you want to talk about CBD, for me, that's a lifesaver, CBD. That's nuts. I don't have sleep problems anymore, everything. It's done wonders for me. Like, personally, it has. I don't often openly talk about it because, in an executive position in a cannabis company, it's a bit hard. But I will say, for me personally, I'm in this because I have a personal relationship with it. I really do. But at the same time, I have got friends. I've got, I know someone who's got epilepsy, and they went and read about this on the internet on one of those websites that just oh yeah, this can help with epilepsy, and do this, blah blah blah. CBD is amazing. So they stopped taking their epilepsy. No, wait, they didn't even stop taking their epilepsy medication. They started taking CBD. They actually worked for me. They started taking CBD, and they had seizure fit after seizure fit after seizure fit. CBD wrecked them. I mean, they literally went from being functional human being with epilepsy to taking this, and they're about 30. It was about 30 years old, and he couldn't come to work. And that was another reason why I find this very interesting, because then I was so obsessed with looking into it, and then I found, yes, okay, when you read about this, it does help with epilepsy. But why is there not one person telling people that it interferes with your epilepsy medication? Because that's really dangerous. And running a media company or like a cannabis business online, and you're talking about the pros of this product, I mean, it morally and justifiably, and for the marketplace and for longevity, and to make sure we're creating something that can scale here, we need to make sure we broach that topic too. And that's where CannabisMD takes its stance. We will make sure that when we're telling you if it's possibly good for epilepsy, that you need to consult your doctor first, because it can interfere with your medication. CBD can interfere with your birth control. If you're a woman and you have anxiety and you start taking CBD, you need to know if you're on birth control, that's going to interfere with it. And all these issues, why nobody seems to know about these things. And that's what we're about. We're about giving you the information, but in a sensible way and a safe way, as safe as we can possibly.
No, that's good. I mean, people need to know, because there's a lot of people hawking CBD for everything. Again, it's a miracle cure, but there's a lot more nuance to it. That's why I wanted your perspective, because I figured you've seen a lot more than most.
Yeah, well, I've been in the cannabis business since the first LPs in Canada went public, I suppose. I've been around.
It would be interesting. Has anyone done a comparison of what conditions CBD helps that marijuana doesn't help, and vice versa? Has anyone looked at the difference between the two, and what do you see?
There's an infographic on this, actually. It splits. I actually saw it first. I actually happened to see. I've seen it in America now, but I happen to know. In my personal opinion, I'm pretty sure it did. It originated from Germany, because I first saw it when I was in Berlin at I think it was called Medical Jane or something. And I got handed this thing. It literally had CBD, CBDA, THC, THCA, THCV, and it had a big wheel. I'll send you the link to it. You can maybe shove it up on the site, or I'm pretty sure we'll put it up on our site as well to make sure you've got it. I'll send you a link. But it'll show you all of the ailments it helps with. So you'll see, where the likes of anxiety is really good for CBDA. You want to get CBDA as well as CBD, and it talks about situations like that. I don't know.
Did you say CBDA, and CBD? And what's the difference?
So CBDA and CBDA is like a cannabidiol acid to be precise. It's also found in the plant. It varies slightly. And CBD likewise is also a cannabinoid, but if you examined fresh hemp, you'd find very little CBD, and instead you'd actually find abundant amounts of CBDA usually. So, I mean, in my personal experience, if you want to talk about taking it, CBD, I've always found great for the likes of, the sleep issues, etc. Pain, helps with muscle pain, but CBDA personally has always helped me more with anxiety, to get a mix. And that's why I maybe say this over here in the UK, maybe I'm speaking ahead, because maybe America hasn't gone this far yet. But over here, when we're buying our CBD, what's my mix of CBD and CBDA? What's going on here? We're getting near there. We're very interested in terp profiles, etc. And I think we'll end up stuck in.
No, okay. Well, what about hemp oil versus CBD? Is it the same thing, or is it completely different? I've seen a lot of products here that say one or the other.
So, yes, let's be very clear. So, essentially what you have is you've got cannabis and you've got hemp, right? And there's very high CBD strain cannabis plants with very low THC, but you're still deriving an oil from cannabis. And on the other side, you've got hemp, has much lower levels of THC. It actually doesn't have abundant levels of CBD. It actually, in some cases, it actually does have lower. But oil derived from hemp, you can legally sell. And not only can you legally sell it, you can crystallize it into your isolate form to make sure you get more CBD out of it, so that you can make sure that even if your oil is low in CBD, you can increase its strength by literally adding in some more CBD. So the separation there really comes because of those legal reasons. Hemp has come into its own because hemp is what was used to essentially bring CBD into the market out of nowhere, because there's much less legal restrictions of hemp than there is of cannabis. But you'll find a much different ratio of cannabinoids in hemp versus cannabis. But when it comes down to it, CBD's CBD. To be brutally honest, if anything, you might find more omega-3 in hemp. That might be the extent of it.
Okay, well, I took you off course, but going back to marijuana versus CBD, you said for anxiety, for instance, it appears that CBD and CBDA are more effective, and is marijuana not effective, or does it make people more anxious, for instance, and maybe talk about another condition?
Yeah, it's really tough, because I'm one side I try to be worried, because obviously I'm not a scientist, just someone who's been around the block quite a bit. I will say one thing though, we can't really compare CBD with marijuana, because marijuana contains THC, CBD, it contains everything. That's what it is. Different strains have different balances. Like for me personally, I find and I pretty much would say this is the common, THC would be the thing that makes you drowsy, sleepy, and if anything, it would cause the paranoia and a little bit of the anxiety. The CBD is that thing that rails in those negative attributes, and also at the same time doesn't make you high. So it takes away from the anxiety, etc. But it's not necessarily going to relax you to the same extent at all. You much more rely on the THC for any psychoactive. So in reality, THC has its medical properties. It's it's known to be better for things like cancer, etc., where the research has been done. But I'll leave that to the read into yourself. Whereas CBD, it definitely, in my personal opinion, my own personal experience of using both products, I find CBD is much better for genuinely just. I find it like a nutrient. I mean, you've got to look at this. This is actually an interesting story. I'm going on a tangent here. I have a Serbian guy who works for me, and he was telling me how before the war broke out in Serbia, how they would fish for fish by grabbing loads of cannabis plants, throwing it in the water. The fish would get stoned, float to the surface, and they'd pick them out while they'd still be living so they could get them later. And then when you start to factor in that, you start to factor in, the fact that they used to feed cows hemp, because it was cheap. CBD through hemp and all of these methods were making its way just like oxytocins in meat, especially in North America, which is pretty bad for at the moment. The CBD and all these cannabinoids were making it into the meat, etc. So we were actually, people in history were always getting this like nutrient. Our body has a CB1 and a CB2 receptor. That's there for a reason. That's it needs something, obviously, or people could have a deficiency. If we have the receptors, in my head, I'm not an expert, but it has to be potentially possible that you can have a deficiency in it. So in that manner of speaking, I will take my THC to calm down, and if I ever got a critical illness, I would probably be on it. But as long as I'm healthy, I'll stick with CBD, and I'll treat it like it's a nutrient, and I'll take it alongside my vitamin C every day.
That's super interesting. That's a great story. Huh.
Yeah,
what do you think is going to be the future for CannabisMD, the future for the THC and CBD industry in general?
So this is where the knowledge navigator comes in, almost more on top of CannabisMD. It is the knowledge navigator, to put into simple words, is a tool that is essentially taking all of this. Like, you're asking me the questions: how do people see this? What do you think they think about CBD? What about THC? Where's this going? What words do people like? What type of people like cannabis? What type of people don't? The knowledge navigator is all about grabbing as much information as possible, throwing it in there, and essentially showing you, these are the words these people like, these are the words these people don't. And I can show you the development of cannabis coming into the world like a normal thing. At the moment, the trends are subject to change. It does appear that the cannabis is naturally, maybe not as quick as people would like, becoming like another thing like whiskey. It's like an alcohol. It's another thing in our lives. And if anything, what we're seeing, and I suppose it's not what's usually expected, but then look at what's happened when things go medical. The people who didn't use cannabis before I think are the ones going through the routes that have been opened, and all of the people from before, a lot of them, and this happens in Canada too, are still buying from their dealers. They're still buying. It's a community thing, and I think that's what's going to die out. I think eventually, as dealers etc. start to die out, and as this becomes more and more acceptable, I think you'll see it make its way. Shoppers Drug Mart in Canada, that's like their Walgreens. I think one day we'll see it in Walgreens, and it will be sitting there. Walgreens over there, and Shoppers Drug Mart in Canada, Holland and Barrett in the UK, Rossmann all over Europe. I think we'll see it everywhere. And as
they
we
have
get
all kinds of medications in Walgreens anyway, so what's the difference? This is better, in my opinion.
That's literally it. This is funny situations. Like eczema, as an example. Like I know my brother used to take eczema cream, and he swapped it to CBD, and it didn't help him. It wasn't as quick acting, but what he found is it would last much longer. Situations like that. There's so many things that need to be discovered with this product, and how it can really benefit people, and how it can be worked into every product in our everyday lives to genuinely improve our lives, without getting us all high and making us all, I don't know what, essentially without being psychoactive, affecting our everyday operation. But still benefiting us. That's what I'm interested in seeing happening, and that's where I think CannabisMD is going. It wants to be the thought leader in that. It wants to be the people not out in front, not those guys, not the guys out already talking about, doing things like cannabis weightlifting or cannabis sports events or memes, etc. I don't necessarily want to be there because I think it's too soon. I think the moment we lifestyle, we bring the audience in, we slowly educate them in, and as they get educated, I think you'll see, CannabisMD will be like the fishing magazine of cannabis. It'll just be the everyday magazine because, hey, fishing's fishing. Nobody makes a hype out of fishing like cannabis. They do, but it's just not in the media, so we don't notice it as much. And I think it'll eventually just become a big thing. It'll be like popular whiskeys and wines. It'll just be a thing in our lives. Think of Prohibition in America in the 1930s. They were probably having the same conversation.
That's true. That's very true. So what's the best way for people to start the educational journey and start engaging with you guys?
So Essentially, there's my recommendation to someone if they're interested in cannabis and they're wavering, or even if they want to get an idea. If you're in the cannabis space, and from our Knowledge Navigator, you want to get an idea of what direction we're taking that, or what direction the market's going, you can sort of keep tabs on our website, and as you see it develop, you can know that it's developing alongside that market. Yeah. I'm excited. I really am excited.
Well, I'll just give you one more example. So, I have a friend that takes CBD, and sometimes she says it works well, sometimes she says it doesn't. She's trying different brands and everything, but how does she know which one's going to work and which one's not, and why? What's the differences? So, are you going to have information like that as well?
Yeah. Funnily enough, we actually did start exactly like that. We very clearly separated our THC versus CBD, but then just as you discussed there, you need those comparisons. It's one ailment. You can't separate THC and CBD apart and then talk about the same ailment. The ailment needs to be, both things need to be covered. So yes, we will. We'll mostly talk about things. What you'll see at the moment, and this is what I would recommend, if you're only getting into this or it's new to you, or you're interested in exploring it, use our site, because it'll talk about CBD, and you won't see much THC in places, or even much mentions of cannabis in your face. But what you will see is, if you're reading something and it could be about CBD, and if we find out it's no good unless you add THC with it, it will say it in that article. Like, it will say, in this situation, unless you're taking THC, you may as well go and use something else if you're only going to use it. But at the end of the day, as I said personally, it may not be represented on the website because it's a personal experience. But I find CBD a bit of a nutrient. So it's something we need, and it's with that mindset that I think that before education can even get that deep, I think it'll end up just this product, the THC and CBD and cannabis in general, will weave its way into society so ingrained that it'll be so quick that the topic hardly even gets to be discussed. The THC CBD comparison, because I think the stigma of THC, or at least with THCA coming out, which is, or is it THCVA, or one of them is, I think it's THCA. It's actually THC without the psychoactive. Or if you take THC as a repository, if you know what a repository is, essentially it's taking it up your anus. Like, it doesn't actually make you high either, but you get all of the benefits.
Oh, it's a depository?
Yeah, so there's actually ways to take the benefits of THC without getting high as well. So it's just, as these things start to roll out, that's where I find it it's a lot more unpredictable, and that's why we have CannabisMD, even with the Knowledge Navigator. It's one of the reasons for it, because we need to literally to validate our data. We need to be making sure that we're leading this industry voice. Like, we're there, and we're working with the industry, and we can see firsthand, even before the data reaches the table, roughly where it would go. And that's where I think it's going.
Well, very good.
Everyday life.
Well, Josh, I hope so. And I've seen that CBD and THC can help a lot of people. So thanks for helping to get the word out and the effort you're doing. So I appreciate you coming on the podcast.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. Yeah, it's you're obviously passionate about cannabis. It's and your questions, it's very refreshing to get asked questions, because your questions were, so sometimes you can get onto these shows, and this can be a problem with websites as well, where that simple question, the difference between THC and CBD. Sometimes even CBDA, it's very complicated, and some people,
right,
it's human nature. I don't want to. You can look like an idiot for 1 minute, or you can look like an idiot for 5 years. That's the phrase, but you don't really look like it. But I respect you a lot for covering the topics from the very base. That was commendable.
You're listening to the Future Tech Podcast with Richard Jacobs. Future technologies such as artificial intelligence, stem cells, 3D printing, gene editing, Bitcoin, blockchain, the microbiome, quantum computing, virtual reality, and exploring space are much closer than you might think. In fact, many early versions of these technologies are in play right now, and the companies that are using these technologies are the focus of this podcast. My goal for you, the listener, is to learn from these podcasts. You may very well learn something that may change the course of your life for the better, steer you towards a new career, or give you insight into addressing a thorny medical problem. Remember, this podcast and its content is informational in nature only. No medical, tax, legal, financial, or psychological advice is being given. If you've enjoyed the podcast, please listen, subscribe, like, and tell your friends about it. Thank you.